Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayerTV top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for ranked play in patch 11.1. As the last patch before set 4.5 begins winds down, we're taking a look at the champions that define the current meta. There's still an emphasis on 4 and 5 cost champions, so expect to see quite a few of them on today's list. With all that said, let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video, and to begin, we have Ahri coming in as the number 10 champion. When compiling today's list, we had a good long look at which mid to late game carries really had an impact on the meta. Ahri and Vanguard Mystic have returned to the meta after multiple buffs to both Aatrox and Ahri, so we knew the pieces of that comp would likely be in our top 10. Ahri only takes the number 10 spot because compared to a lot of other 4-cost carries in the meta, she's not quite as consistent, nor is she really that flexible of a champion. There's ways you can try to fit her into other compositions, but really she only shines in Vanguard Mystic as she needs a long fight to really pop off. Of course, when she does get a good cast of her ability, it's usually going to win the fight. But with it taking a while for her to get the mana to cast and the unpredictable nature of where she's going to aim makes her less valuable than other carry champions. Still, she's one of the current champions defining the meta, and as such, deserved a spot on the list. Surprisingly, the top 10 has quite a few Spirit champions on it, despite Spirit as a trait doing poorly in the meta. The number 9 champion we'll be talking about next is Teemo. During the early game, it's important to try and play your strongest board and to preserve health. A strong Chosen is one of the best ways to strengthen up a weak board, and Teemo is easily at the top of the list when it comes to the best early game Chosen champion. Even on his own, if you can 2-star him, he'll do quite well. While there are other 2-cost champions that will do well, Teemo brings both crowd control and good damage. In addition to that, if you have Sharpshooter, which you're likely going to have when using Teemo, his ability will hit multiple targets. And if those players are slightly clumped up, he'll hit even more with just one cast. Teemo is also a fantastic item holder during those early stages of the game, which will likely increase the effectiveness of his ability. Unfortunately, Teemo isn't quite up to his old standards, so hitting a Chosen of him early, or even just 2-starring him, won't always be enough to get you to level 8 unscathed. But you'll be hard-pressed to find a more reliable 2-cost champion to use in your board during stages 2, 3, and parts of 4. We said there were a lot of Spirit champions, didn't we? Well, up next we have Kindred coming in as the number 8 champion on today's list. Where Teemo is one of the premier 2-cost champions, Kindred is sure the top of the 3 costs. Even just a 1-star Kindred can carry fights during stage 2 and 3, and if you can 2-star them, you'll have an easy time making it to level 8. Basically, what Kindred brings to your board is consistent damage. With items like Hand of Justice or Giant Slayer, that damage becomes even better, so Kindred makes for a fantastic item holder before you get your main carry later on. Another reason to run Kindred is that they easily fit into any board, since you really don't need either of their traits to do well. That said, you can utilize those traits effectively with just a few other champions. Hunter pairs well with an early Aphelios, especially if you have Moonlight on your board. Spirit, on the other hand, is a little bit less valuable, but Yuumi is a great mid-game Mystic to have in your board, so having Kindred to pair with them adds a minor attack speed buff to your team. Later on in the game, you'll want to trade out your Kindred for better carries, but they're still relevant when running Hunter-focused comps. At that point in the game, you can just toss aura items like Chalice or Zeke's onto them, and it should be enough to make them contribute during fights. All in all, Kindred is a champion you can always look to run during the early and mid-game portions of the game if given the option. Up next, we have our Mystic spot, which goes to our number 7 champion, Zilean. Honestly, most of the Mystic champions are worth playing at some point in the game, but Zilean is one of the strongest options in the late game. There's no denying that having a resurrection ability on a champion is good, especially since Guardian Angel has always been one of the best items throughout the history of TFT. And really, that's all Zilean needs to be useful late game. Mystic obviously has a place in the meta, but Cultists really don't, at least at the point in the game where you'd be playing Zilean. But even without either of those synergies, you could add in Zilean to your board and still get a lot of value thanks to his ability. A 2-star Zilean can easily swing the game in your favor. Moving along, let's talk about the number 6 champion, Aatrox. Aatrox gets the most improved vote for this patch because they really buffed the heck out of him. His armor was increased from a respectable 40 to a ridiculous 70, and his health went up by 100. Those are pretty crazy buffs for a frontliner, and it shows as he's being played a lot more than previously, even over champions like Sejuani. The buffs to Aatrox have also shifted the meta back towards Vanguard Mystic. It's not the best composition, but between Aatrox being a beefy frontliner and Ahri receiving small buffs, it's once again a viable build in the current meta. It's especially good against any Hunter or Jhin compositions that aren't taking into account the amount of armor Vanguard champions can have. We will say that while Aatrox is currently in the spotlight, that Sejuani is still an amazing frontliner and should not be ignored. Look to pair Sejuani and Aatrox together for a devastating frontline combo. Our top 5 champions will look quite familiar to the previous metas because, to be honest, not much has shifted in the late game meta. It still heavily favors 4 and 5 cost champions. The first to talk about is Kayn, as he's coming in at number 5. Once again, Kayn makes it into the top champions list because there's few champions late game that can do as much damage as he can. Toss a few items on him, get the blue or red Kayn buff, and watch him destroy the enemy team's backline. It's no surprise that a champion like Kayn is being removed in 4.5 because he's hard to balance around, mainly because Shade provides instant access to the backline. While Kayn can fit into practically any late composition, he's also essential for Zed Ninja. Zed 3 can carry well enough, but in the ultra late game, you will need Kayle to lessen the burden placed upon Zed. That is the main reason as to why Zed is not in our top 10, while Kayn is, since the late game is pivotal to placing well in a game. The main downside to Kayn is that he's quite contested. Most players will take a Kayn whenever they're presented with the option, so finding him may be difficult, and 2-starring him is even more so. That said, if you can high roll him early enough, then you should be in a strong position to place somewhere within the top 4. Let's move on to the number 4 champion on today's list, Jhin. It's important to have a solid carry once you're into the mid to late game, and Jhin is one of the best. Because Jhin can do an insane amount of damage on his own without factoring in any traits, it makes him one of the most flexible carries in the game. You can easily slot him into any composition, though you'll mainly see him in either a Dusk focus build or a mixture of sharpshooters and other traits. Dusk Jhin is one of the main compositions because Jhin synergizes with both the trait and champion so well. Vayne will give him sharpshooter while the Dusk trait itself boosts the damage of his 4th shot. Riven with Thresh are good frontline, and to top it off, both Cassiopeia and Lilia bring strong crowd control to the board. Put all of that together and you have a solid comp with Jhin leading as the primary carry. There are plenty of other ways to utilize Jhin besides in a Dusk comp, simply due to the fact that he can output so much damage. Throw a Deathblade or an Infinity Edge on him, and he'll wreck most boards. The main problems you'll have when running Jhin are against Vanguard-heavy compositions or Shade champions that can jump onto him easily. Even in those cases, you can always build a Last Whisper against champions with high armor, and proper positioning can save him against Shades and Assassins. Even though Jhin is super flexible, he's not quite as strong as the next champion coming in at number 3, Ashe. What makes Ashe a better carry than Jhin? Well, it's not so much that Ashe on her own is better, it's that Ashe in a Hunter composition is a more reliable board. Ashe will output an insane amount of damage, but her burst doesn't quite match up to the damage that Jhin does. But with Hunter, she not only brings consistent damage to the table, but also gains a big spike of damage every few seconds thanks to the trait. You may be wondering, what about Aphelios or even Warwick? Well, Aphelios requires specific conditions to do well, and Warwick really doesn't care about the Hunter trait. That said, both of those champions are great to pair with Ashe, but if we're talking about potential as a carry, Ashe easily overshadows the other two. Not only is her damage comparable or better than the other two, she also doesn't need specific items to do well. Sure, Giant Slayer is ideal and you'll want a defensive item like Quicksilver, but even without those, you can find a way to itemize her and she'll still do well. With Hunter going away in set 4.5, now is the time to go out and play Ashe Hunter before it's gone forever. Next up, we have Yone coming in as the number 2 champion. Just like 10.25, we have Yone only taking the number 2 spot because despite how amazing he is as a 5-cost champion, he really only brings damage to the table. Sure, that damage is amazing, but outside of that, the only contribution to the fight is going to be Adept. Of course, let's not downplay the impact that Yone has on the current meta. He's definitely the best 5-cost champion when 2-starred and fits well into any late game comp, especially with Adept. The armor and magic resist shred his ability has is also even better in the current meta because of Vanguard Mystic rising up in popularity. Plus, a well-positioned Yone can access the backline similarly to Kayn. Basically, if you want a strong late game, pick up Yone when you can. And once again, the number 1 champion of the meta is Shen. Yep, Shen is back again. Really, it's hard to not just always toss him into the number 1 spot because he contributes so much to the meta. Both Adept and Mystic are used in practically every comp as splash traits, and Shen gives you both of those in one champion. We can't state it enough how impactful that combination of synergies is, and how easily you can build a comp from just Shen, another Mystic, and another Adept. Besides those 2 traits, Ninja also has a spot in the meta, with Ninja Shade being a viable comp. Traits aside, he's also one of the best frontline champions you can have on your board. so really no other champion brings as much to the table as Shen does. Alright, that's it for our top 10 champions for patch 11.1. But before we go, we have a few honorable mentions to cover. The honorable mentions are Aphelios, Yasuo, and Zed. The reason we're lumping them all together is that they all have the same issue. Basically, all of them can do really well in the meta, but require specific conditions to be met in order to carry. Aphelios needs himself either one or two other Moonlight champions to be 3-starred. Yasuo needs to be chosen and 3-starred for Duelist, while Zed needs the same for Zed Ninja. That said, Aphelios can be used just to provide Hunter for Ashe, and Yasuo can mainly be used in the early game as a carry. It's only when you want to focus on one of these champions do you need to meet the requirements of 3-starring them and having perfect items. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. The meta's been in a healthy spot for a while now, which is a great way to end the current set before 4.5 shakes it all up next week. Let us know in the comment section below what champions you're going to miss in 4.5 and which champions you're excited for. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.